You're listening to the Mind Over Murder podcast.
My name is Bill Thomas. I'm a writer, consulting producer, and now podcaster. I am now trying to use my experience as the brother of a murder victim to help other victims of violent crime. I'm working on a book on the unsolved Colonial Parkway Murders, and I'm the co-administrator of the Colonial Parkway Murders Facebook group together with Kristin Dilley.
My name is Kristin Dilley. I'm a writer, a researcher, a teacher, and a victims advocate, as well as the social media manager and co-administrator for the Colonial Parkway Murders Facebook page with my partner in crime, Bill Thomas.
You're listening to the Mind Over Murder podcast.
Welcome to Mind Over Murder. I'm Kristin Dilley.
And I'm Bill Thomas.
We are happy to introduce you this week to our friend, Lisa Zambetti. She is the co-host of Real Crime Profile and the co-host of Killer Casting. We are thrilled to be able to sit down with her and talk all about her projects as well as her work on the hit TV series Criminal Minds.
It's a fantastic conversation. We hope you'll really enjoy it.
Yeah, we loved sitting down to talk with Lisa. She has long been a supporter of our endeavors, both with the Colonial Parkway Murders case and with our podcast. So we were thrilled to have the time to sit and hang out with her and get caught up on her events and projects. As always, we thank you all for taking the time to leave us 5-star ratings and reviews. We do ask that you continue to do so if you haven't done so already. Here's the English teacher assigning you your homework. We're always very interested to know what you all are thinking about the work that we are doing, and we hope to improve with every episode. We are happy to be joined today by Lisa Zambetti, the casting director for CBS's Criminal Minds, co-host of Real Crime Profile, and host of Killer Casting. Lisa, thank you so much for joining us.
Oh my God, don't be so formal. Goodness gracious. You know how much I love both of you. I am so happy to see your beautiful faces. I know your audience can't see your faces, but seeing you just does my heart so good. I don't think I've seen you since CrimeCon.
Oh my gosh. Is that
in
true?
New Orleans. How long ago?
Right.
God, it feels like a lifetime ago.
Yeah, it really does. I think that was
a year and a half ago.
Last June, I think it was.
Yeah.
Yeah, what a time. We survived a hurricane coming through New Orleans. But it's so good to see you. I'm so happy for this show. I'm so proud of both of you. And I'm so happy to be here.
Thank you. You're actually one of the people that encouraged us to get into podcasting. We have a lot to thank you for. Full disclosure.
You have the best voice. Yes.
Oh, thank you. Listeners, if you listen carefully, you may hear some jingling. Oh, and maybe even a little dog sounds because Lisa is taking care of a special guest. Who's your special guest?
My special guest is Buddy. So last night at the last minute, I got an emergency call from a rescue that I volunteered for before, and which I highly encourage your listeners to do. And they had a dog, Buddy, that they were rescuing from a terrible situation, and they asked if I could take him in. These days during quarantine, animals really make a huge difference in your mental well-being, your emotional well-being. And I was like, I can't say no. So I have a huge golden retriever here who just wants love. He's been in isolation for far too long with an abusive owner. And the minute I saw him, the minute my children saw him, he was just completely wanting love. And so I have to keep him right next to me. He's getting used to this new environment and people who actually are here to love him. So if you hear a jingle, it's just his little leash. But please, if you can, right now is a great time to volunteer because so many people are working from home, and I'm very blessed that I can work from home and my children are going to school at home. So he's going to have a home full of people to give him some love. So please forgive any jingling you hear. And I have to keep the doors open to keep fresh air flowing. So I'm not in an enclosed oral space right now that's perfect for podcasting. I'm at my kitchen table, but please forgive that. No.
Well, I think Buddy just won the lotto in terms of a really nice people to stay with you and your sons.
Oh, it's our pleasure. It's our privilege. So anyway, but I am here to talk to you. What am I here to talk to you about? You guys know everything about me. And I've had Bill on our podcast a million times. And what are we talking about today, guys?
We certainly want to know more about what you're up to with your new podcast. But for people who aren't familiar with you, can you tell us a little bit about yourself and your professional background first?
Or my unprofessional background, as it may be. Yeah, so I had the privilege of being the casting director for Criminal Minds. It's a little show that was on CBS for 15 years. And in honor of Kristin, who I know is a huge fan, I'm wearing my Quantico sweatshirt that we all were given. We've all been given such great gifts over the years at Criminal Minds. But anyway, so I was casting director on Criminal Minds. I cast psychopaths, victims, doctors, FBI agents, everything in between. And it was just the love of my life, and so privileged to work with the writers and producers, but also as with Jim Clementi, who is a writer producer on Criminal Minds, but he started off as the consultant and really the show got greenlit because of Jim, because Mandy Patinkin was so taken by Jim and his story as a FBI behavioral analysis profiler, which is a very rarefied air. And yeah, I've been very privileged. And I know our friend Jim Fitzgerald has consulted for a while on Real Crime Profile. Laura Richards has also had input on certain scripts that she was brought in to give her very professional opinion on. So it's just been like a big family that just keeps expanding and expanding. But I loved casting for that show. If I may say so myself, I gave many actors their first job that propelled them into space and propelled them into other careers. And I was very lucky, especially in the last few years as we were wrapping up the series, to cast some very special guests like Danny Glover and Jane Lynch, and actors who were brought in to send the show off. And it was just a great freaking love story of my life. I love all the series regulars. I got to know them very well. And all the crew and everybody behind the scenes that you all will never know who brought that show to life.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I'm a huge Criminal Minds fan. Our listeners know that I am a huge CSI fan because we did have a writer from CSI on, and I was a total fangirl about it.
Oh my gosh. I thought you and David Rambo were going to run away together.
So I'm trying to keep my fangirl glee to a much more repressed level.
These fans, it's because of people like Kristin that keep these shows on. Our fans are longtime viewers, very loyal viewers. They know the ins and outs of every character. They know every cast change. They feel every cast change. And we've had a few. And that's the crazy thing. It's almost like how Law and Order has survived. But our series regulars have had massive changes. And for whatever reason, the brilliance behind the producers of the show and the heart of the show and the fans of the show kept us on for 15 years. Think about that. The people on the show have had weddings, births, divorces, deaths in the family. We have gotten to know each other on a whole other level than many other shows. And we just survived through, I think for a while, our biggest competition was American Idol. And then it was something like was always up against us at some point. And we just kept chugging along and kept surviving. So that's a testament to CBS, to ABC Studios, who was our producer, to Erica Messer, who's our showrunner, and all of the producers and people behind the scenes. So a big thanks to them.
Do you mind if we get into a little bit more about casting in that some of our listeners know that I've worked in film and TV, but for the labor unions and organizations that were outside the nuts and bolts part of the television business. In my limited experience with casting and my perception of casting, I always pictured you and other casting directors sitting behind like a folding table almost in a room and asking actors to come in and read for parts. How did casting change over the 15 years that you were directly involved in casting Criminal Minds, for example?
Okay, so how has casting changed? Oh my God, Bill, that is such a huge thing. So diversity and inclusion is something that has hugely changed. When I first got into casting, before I worked on Criminal Minds, there's really didn't want to cast people of color in bad roles where they were drug dealers and the villains and stuff, they were just very sensitive that they didn't want to perpetuate any stereotypes. And so on Criminal Minds, I think that was the same. We didn't want to make, well, certainly because the show is based on real cases, some of Jim Clementi's real cases and other real cases that our producers have studied, 99.9% of serial killers are white men. So there's not a lot of diversity in the people who are going to be cast in these juicy roles, that they are juicy roles, as the unsub in our world. So you have to really search. You have to search for the things like the case that Jim worked on, like the DC sniper, things like that, where there is diversity in the offender. On the one hand, that's great that we're not perpetuating an untrue stereotype. But on the other hand, it's not great because you're not giving a BIPOC actor a role. You're not giving them a job. So that's always the struggle. It's, here's this great role that's going to pay you like $8,000 for the week. Okay. And I want to give that to the best actor and that best, but we can't, but because of this conflict between who to cast and how is that going to be seen and is that going to do more damage than good, I can't cast an actor of color in that role. And sometimes we've had actors of color, BIPOC directors who are like, I do not want to see an actor of color play this psychopath. I just don't.
The bad guy role.
That. And I understand that completely. But then you have the network and the studio saying, no, as much diversity as possible, please. We're beyond that now. We really want to have just a colorblind casting or an incredibly inclusive casting that doesn't just include ethnicity, but includes ability, includes disabled actors and deaf actors. And we want to, I don't even know if I want to say this story because it's so sad, but we wanted to include actors of different abilities in roles that were just normal roles, right? It's not a role that's written for an actor in a wheelchair. It's not a role that's written for a deaf actor or a blind actor. It's just a role. And that's what my partner, Becky Silverman, and I tried to do. And we did get bumped on by certain people saying, we can't accommodate that person. We can't, why don't you just wait till we write a role that's for a disabled actor? And that's not the point. They don't want that. They want to just be seen as actors. And in any way possible, if I can cast someone in a role that it doesn't matter if I so much wanted to cast a medical examiner who was deaf. I just thought that would be just the coolest thing to show a scientist who's deaf and maybe has to work with it's either translator or interpreter. I don't remember which is the role, and have one of our series regulars know American Sign Language and be able to communicate. I mean, that would be the cutest thing. But every time I would mention it, it would be like, it's extra cost to hire an interpreter. It's just like the real world. Come on, it's crazy. Yeah, exactly. And finally, we did cast an actor who used a wheelchair as a reporter, because I thought, how hard can that be? They don't have to, they're a reporter. They can be anywhere. It was still, I don't want to say they didn't want to accommodate it, but it was a huge conversation on how to accommodate that it made me very sad that we got that. Anyway, that's a really long question. Casting directors, we are always trying to be inclusive. It's just drilled into our DNA. We want to reflect the America that we know and the America that we don't know.
When you are looking to cast someone in the role of the unsub, the psychopath, someone like, say, C. Thomas Howell, who played the Reaper, what do you look for in an actor to determine whether or not they're going to be able to adequately play an unsub with particular menace and panache, I guess?
So this is a collaborative process. It starts with a script. You read the script and in your mind, you just think, what is the nugget of this? What is the energy of this? There's a lot of different people who could do this, and you want to bring in a spectrum of people. And then you sit down, fortunately on our show, and this is not true for a lot of shows, I could actually walk up to the writer's office and plop down on their couch and say, okay, why did you write this? Who is this based on? What were you watching that made you? And there is, it's important. Some writers had just watched something that it might be a very obscure independent film that they watched or a documentary they watched. So I really want to get to the nugget of where the inspiration for the character came from. And then we just start spitballing and talking. Does it feel like this? Does it feel like this? What's the world? How obvious is this person as a psychopath? Are they a charm and harm kind of person that you'd never suspect, like Bill? Like Bill Thomas.
Thanks. Or menacing like
or
Kristin.
Are they exactly. Or are they someone that you see the crazy coming? That you sent, you know what I mean?
Let it be.
Like Kristin.
Like Kristin's waving. Yeah, that's me.
Right. So I wasn't there. I wasn't in the casting department when they cast the Reaper, but what a great idea, because then you're also thinking about what actors have we not seen in a while? What actors haven't done this kind of role before? So there are the tried and true list of actors that you could bring in. And also, do you want a guest star level actor that's going to cost you a lot of money, but be worth a lot of money? Or is this kind of one of these unsubs that we can give a newcomer a shot and it doesn't have to be somebody super fancy? The powers that be at the time had the brilliant idea to bring in C. Thomas Howell, and I really think it regenerated his career. Oh. Yeah. And when I see those, and then when I was in the casting department, we did end up bringing him back and back and back.
Oh, he's wonderful.
The fans really, they really responded. And so that just goes to show that we are listening to what the audience's reaction is. We're trying to grow the show and develop the history of the show based on what works.
So
so that was great.
Does that mean you would reach out to the agents of certain actors and say, has he or she ever thought about doing a guest role on a show like ours, or we've got a role that might be right for so-and-so?
Yep, exactly. And sometimes, so we put down the roles on something called Breakdown that goes out to all the agents and managers. So this is what we're looking for this week. These are the roles we have this week. And we look at who the agents are pitching to.
I hear buddy.
Pitching to us, I know. And sometimes it'll be like all the normal looking, crazy, psychopathic looking actors. And once in a while, like Bill. And then sometimes it'll be somebody like, oh, whoa, I never thought of that person. But yeah, there's a kernel of that I think that there's pathos in procedurals. There's pathos in psychopaths. There's damage in there. So if you see an actor, even if they've only done comedy or if they've only done a certain kind of genre, if there's something in them that you see, this could work. That's the beauty of my job, to see that. And then sometimes we'll make a list. We'll just make a list of ideas of actors who were not submitted by their agents or managers. And we'll call them up and say, okay, what is this guy doing? Would he be interested in this? And we make an offer. So that's called offer only, which is the very rarefied air of actors who only get offers. They don't have to audition. They don't have to meet the producers. They just get an offer. So I wasn't there when C. Thomas, I don't know if he auditioned or not. I'm not sure. However it came to be, that was great. Another one of our great villains was Mr. Scratch.
Mr. Scratch. Yeah, I was going to say.
Mr. Scratch. And Bodie, he's a pretty well-known actor. He auditioned for that role. We auditioned, oh my God, we had so many sessions for that villain. But Bodie he gave a look to the camera that we're just, based on just the look he gave, a little, at the end of the scene that he was auditioning for, he just gave this little, I know this is visual, but he gave this little look to the camera. And I was like, that's it. That is this character, and he won it with that audition. Some actors won't audition, but some will.
They refuse. In other words, I'm too accomplished for that.
Correct. But that's a stock that goes up and down. So one year you might have an actor who's it's really their agent. This is an offer. His body of work speaks for itself. You shouldn't have to audition for him. And I would be like, he's only done comedies. I think he can do this role, but my director and my writer don't even know him. But then the next year, that same actor maybe didn't get the pilot they wanted, or maybe their show was canceled, maybe things turned down, and suddenly their agent is, he'll come in to audition. So that's just our world. The stock of people as you go up and down, and you just have to ride those waves.
And just from a fangirl point of view, one of my favorite on Subs that you guys cast was Tim Curry. He did an amazing job.
Oh my God.
Did he have to audition, or was that just?
Are you kidding?
So?
No, I'm sorry. Dr. Frankenstein did not have to audition. He could, if he did, we would have loved it. And if he came in his fishnet hose and a corset, that would be even better. But no, he did that. And that was before I joined the show, but that was the only episode that I watched after I got hired. I'd never even heard of Criminal Minds. I know that is like to you, but I'd never heard of Criminal Minds when I got hired to come on board. And that was the first episode that I watched. And it really, what an incredible, oh my God, crazy performance that was. And I was like, whoa, this is really interesting territory.
You're listening to Mind Over Murder. We'll be right back after this word from our sponsors. We're back here at Mind Over Murder. Let me add something too. I don't talk much about this, but some of our listeners know I worked for SAG-AFTRA for a number of years. And I'll just mention something. Those of us that work full time, this is a little bit hard to grasp, but actors don't work every single day. And in order to qualify for your health insurance, which is an extremely important thing for all of us, you have to earn a certain amount of money each year. Now, if you are a working actor, but maybe things have slowed down a bit or that sort of thing, you might look to a show like Criminal Minds if you could book a gig that would pay X number of days of SAG-AFTRA scale, they call it. You're looking to make enough money that year, in that calendar year, to qualify for health insurance. Did that kind of thing enter into any conversations you'd have with agents? You were talking about when people are hot, everybody wants them, and then someone that maybe isn't as working as much, maybe they've aged out of certain roles or whatever, they'd be more interested in that sort of thing. Did that enter into the pitches you'd get from agents?
So for larger actors, let's just call them more known actors, they don't say that directly, but you discern that because I'm like, why are they submitting this person? This person is a little bit high level for this particular role. So they won't say that out loud. Now, what we do as casting directors as a family, let's say that, and this happens, unfortunately, far too often. Let's say there's an actor who's about to run out of their insurance, just a journeyman actor that nobody else would really know. And they have cancer or their spouse has cancer, and losing their insurance will be a really big deal. A call will go out amongst us saying, hey, do you have any roles this person could be considered for? Wow. So again, the best actor has to get the role. Who you filter and consider is to our discretion. And if this is an actor who, oh my gosh, this is a great actor, and this is a great reason to bring them in. And usually they're overqualified for the role. They're overqualified to be the cocktail waitress saying, here's your drinks, or the medical intern saying, doctor, I think you need to come into this, or whatever. And so that's something I can say. Now, again, we always want to serve the story and the show. So we're not going to just square peg, round hole somebody into a role that they shouldn't be in. But we could get 2,000 submissions for one role.
Wow.
So of those 2,000, we always have to filter. We have to filter on a myriad of reasons. And sometimes those are gut reactions, whatever it is. It's an art. I hate to be too foofy about it, but casting is an art. And it's an art of imagination and gut reactions. And anyway, so if we can help somebody, we do want to do that. For a small co-star role, that can be the difference between having coverage and not. And that's important. We're a family.
Do people still audition in person? In other words, let's put COVID aside for a second. Let's please do that. Do actors still audition in person? Is it all shifted to online?
This is going to be very inside baseball, but pre-COVID, casting directors would pre-read people in person, meaning you come in person, you audition for me, and then I decide if you're going to come to a callback for the director and the writer and the producers. Or you come in person for me, I tape you, and then I decide which tape I show to the producer or the director. But yes, you would be seeing many actors during each day, depending on the role. And is on Criminal Minds, we'd have an average of 20 roles each episode. That's a lot. That's in addition to our series regulars and recurring roles. So you would see a lot of actors. That doesn't mean that the producers would see them in person. On our show, we did a lot of live producer sessions, but there are plenty of shows. I worked on Ryan Murphy's show where he never saw anybody in person. He only saw people on tape that we had taped for him. So
was that just Ryan's
preference?
Well,
when you're somebody like him who has so many shows, this was like prime Glee was happening. He had so many shows on the air that we had to call his assistant saying, can you please have Ryan watch this tape to see if we can cast this person? So it was already turning towards more on tape auditions for the producers, but not for the casting department, because we love actors. We want to see them. We want to hear them. We want to redirect them. They're going to come in with one choice and we want to give them adjustments and be with them. We're rooting for them. Things were definitely changing. And now post-COVID, thankfully, all of the producers understand that it's all got to be online. It's all got to be via Zoom. So I've worked on several projects since the quarantine, and I have my own Zoom auditions, just like we are right now. And I read with them on Zoom, and I record them and they do their scene. And then I send those tapes to the producer, and then we'll have a callback on Zoom. Now, for some producers, that's a big change. That's for some producers that aren't used to Zoom. You have to convince them that, I'm sorry, we cannot see this person in person unless you're going to rent me in a huge warehouse and put plexiglass everywhere. And we're not going to put actors in jeopardy because you're going to have a ton of actors waiting in the waiting room. And you're going to have a ton of producers being in the same room. And we're just not going to put our staff through that kind of thing. So right now, everything is on Zoom or EcoCast Live. I want to give a shout out to a different platform other than Zoom. EcoCast Live is an internal industry proprietary system that we use.
So by the time you had arrived at Criminal Minds, you got to know Jim Clemente. And how did the idea for Real Crime Profile come about?
I think this is a rather complicated answer, but it all came together. I was listening to the Hayman Lee murder case, which you're going to know is serial. And I was addicted to that. And whenever I had a casting session where Jim was the writer, I would always be pouncing on him. What do you think about this? And what do you think about that? And what's really going on? And when we had the horrific San Bernardino shooting incident, that was the same day that I had a session with Jim. And I was like, what makes somebody do that? They have a child that they're leaving behind on a certain suicide mission to not only kill others, but and he gave me all of these answers in long form. He talked with me for a really long time. And every time I'd seen Jim on CNN or any other thing, he's only got like a soundbite to get his answer. Right. But when he's with me and we're waiting between actors or we're chit-chatting, and he can really talk to me in depth and with nuance. And so that kind of put it in my mind. And then I was listening to Bob Ruff's, this was before it was even called Truth and Justice. Bob Ruff had a spinoff of Serial called Serial Dynasty, where he was continuing to investigate the murder of Hayman Lee. And one day, Bob said, I'm really trying to get on this FBI criminal profiler, Jim Clemente. I've emailed him. Hopefully he'll come on. And I was like, what?
I know Jim.
My Jim Clemente? What? And I was like, how small is this world? Here is Bob Ruff, like in the wilds of Michigan, podcasting from his shed. And I'm like, that's interesting. And I saw Jim shortly and I said, are you going to go on this podcast? He's like, oh yeah, I got to get back to that guy. He's the fireman. And I'm like, yes. So I don't know. Anyway, so the true crime podcasting world was just beginning. And so then Jim did go on Bob's podcast, and I was like, wow, that was so awesome, because Jim could really expand on his knowledge and his feelings, and he could really take his time. He doesn't have just 30 seconds to get in whatever. So the next time we were in a session, I went up to him, I said, I have a crazy ass idea. I would love, I said, would you think about, and I was so nervous because he's so intimidated at that time. I know him now. But at that time, he was such a mysterious character to me. He's very intense looking. He's very quiet. At that time, to me, he was very quiet and very intense. Like he looked right through you. And I was like, oh my God. But I went up to him and I said, look, I've been thinking, would you like to do a podcast where you can have a long form forum to talk about cases? And I would ask you about cases. And what do you think about that? And he was like, I would love that. And I was shocked. I was absolutely shocked. And I said, my husband has a podcast. It's a sports podcast, but he knows how to upload the RSS feed. He knows how to get it all out there. And then Jim's like, I have a studio at home that we could record. And so it was like, I have a barn. My mom can make the costumes.
We could put on a show.
And then he came up to me later and he said, I have this friend, Laura Richards, who I've been partnering with quite a bit, and she would be great to bring on too, because no two profilers necessarily think the same way. And she would just add a great element to it. And I was like, okay, sure. I had no idea who she was. And then we were shortly thereafter at a Christmas party, and Laura and I spent many minutes in the bathroom, like talking about the show, what we could cover. So it really came together very organically. And they had maybe they had been talking about doing a podcast too. I don't know. I think probably that was in the zeitgeist starting a troop. But anyway, from my perspective, that's how it all came together. And we didn't even have a title. We got together, we started recording about Making a Murderer, because that was such a huge, explosive Netflix series. And we just started talking about it. And we've found our way. We've found our niche. We found our balance. And what makes this show work is, of course, we have two extraordinary law enforcement officers with incredible case backgrounds. But we also have somebody who's like an expert at just being a human being, and just my questions and my reactions to things. And I'm representing all the other people who are out there who have experienced crime and witnessed crime and are empathetic to victims. And so that's how it's all come together.
I feel like you're a stand-in for all of us. I don't know if Kristin feels the same way, but I feel like...
Yeah, no, definitely.
I've been lucky now enough to get to know the three of you pretty well, but I feel like Jim and Laura both get into a lot of really interesting detail, and I learn a lot of stuff. Since I can't ask them live what I want to know, I often feel that you're standing in for the audience and asking the questions that we want to understand. And I almost feel like you're our spokesperson on the show. And also steering them a bit.
A tiny bit. Look, I think the thing, as you all know, as your show is an example, true crime podcasts have exploded over the past few years. And some of them are people who have zero law enforcement cred, nothing to do with it. And they're just talking about their opinions. And that's great. That's great. That's one type. People who don't know, but they have a reaction to crime. And that's awesome. And anecdotal evidence. And then on the other side of the spectrum, you have true people with law enforcement cred who are droning on and on very professorially, or just in a way that is great, but not a conversation. And I think with our show, we try to bring that all together, the best of all of that. If you want to watch a lecture about criminology or behavior, you can just go to John Jay Criminal College and watch a lecture. We're not tuning in to watch a lecture. We're tuning in to watch reaction to offenders and reaction to victims and giving victims their voices. And that takes a human like me with no experience, but who is reacting to violence and reacting to injustice. And it also takes law enforcement who are the ones who solve those crimes and who are bringing justice. What I love is that we've got that triumvirate, we've got that triptych, we've got that three very different voices speaking about crime that we all experience.
And for our listeners who don't know, Lisa, Jim, and Laura were good enough to feature Bill and the Colonial Parkway Murders on RCP. And we can't thank you enough for the attention to detail and the real empathetic approach that you took to it.
My God, it was our honor.
Yeah, it was
to have you on.
It was fun. And when I guested on Real Crime Profile, some listeners criticized Jim, who is a man of very strong opinions, and all three of you weigh in. But it's funny, Jim was criticized by some listeners pretty strongly. They felt that he was challenging of me. We did this face to face, and I know you now with the technology, and Laura's sometimes in the UK, et cetera. You guys do the podcast sometimes remotely. This was the four of us in a studio. I like mixing it up and discussing different things, and we don't all have to agree. And Kristin and I have a longstanding commitment that we don't always have to agree on every viewpoint on a case or whatever it is. You guys were wonderful, and I didn't feel that Jim had done anything untoward. He had expressed some strong opinions, and I had expressed some strong opinions, and we kind of did a little bit of just light head knocking in terms of a particular viewpoint. But I was really surprised later. People were like, Jim, you were mean to Bill, and that kind of thing. And I hadn't walked away from my experience. We recorded 4 episodes over 2 different Sundays. We did back-to-backs. I thought it was really cool, and it was one of my first times appearing on a podcast and being able to speak about the Colonial Parkway murders at some length. It was very interesting. The FBI actually, I didn't know they did this, but they actually listened to Real Crime Profile, and they actually contacted us and contacted me.
Oh my goodness.
One of us had said something that they thought was a little too revealing, and I had to call. In this case, I called up Jim, and I was like, Jim, they want us to take something out. And they had gone like to the exact minute and second and said, we would like you to take this out. And it was already on the air. I didn't exactly know how podcasts work. I had just been a guest. So Jim said, yeah, that's possible. We can do that. And so you guys had to go back, and we edited out a little snippet. So it disappeared. I didn't realize the Federal Bureau of Investigation listens to Real Crime Profile.
Oh my God.
And they actually...
Now I'm nervous.
Yeah, they actually cared about what we talked about. And in my sister's case, the Colonial Parkway murders, they felt we were offering a little bit too much information in terms of what is still an ongoing case.
You just triggered a million things in my mind right now. So first of all, this is not a scripted show. Your show is not a scripted show, neither is ours. So to the extent that what starts to happen, the chemical reaction that happens when you have a guest on and somebody expresses one opinion and the other, that's gold to me. That's why that's the real part of Real Crime Profile. It's a real reaction to real people's lives. So this is what I would say to that. I would say, how long does this case have to go on? So what if we said something? What is that going to stop? Are you about to bring in the killer? I haven't seen it yet. And then somebody like Jim would say, Lisa, you don't understand. So that's okay for me to be wrong. But I need to be able to have that expression of frustration, right? Yeah. It's okay, we cut 2 minutes, 20 seconds out of a podcast. Okay, where's the killer? What did that accomplish?
Oh, believe me, I feel the same
know.
way.
I can't even come close to the frustration you must feel. But see, that's the thing. It's like I feel like I have to have my reaction. Right?
Sure.
And it may not be PC, it may not be whatever, but it's just cutting through a certain amount of bullshit. And then I have my co-host to say, Lisa, it's not bullshit. This is why it's not bullshit. And then we all learn something. But if we're all just at a script and we're just all being polite and blah, 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 I don't want to listen to that. So like for me, I wanted to do a podcast. Believe it or not, this is going to be shocking. I'm a very shy person. I'm very introverted. My friends who know that I do a podcast are like, who are you? Very insecure. For the first 2 years of Criminal Minds, I didn't talk to anybody. I was so shy and so insecure. And Joe Mantegna would come up to me and say, hey, paisana. And I would like pee my pants. I wouldn't even know what to do. Goobler would come up and hug and kiss me, and I would just be in a coma afterwards. I was very shy and very introverted. So doing a podcast for me, and also when you're working on a big show, you have a corporate entity that you're responsible to. You have to be very politically correct. You have to be very nonpartisan. You have to be very even keeled. But on my own podcast, I can freak out. I can cry. I can ask questions. I can do what I want because it's mine. It's ours, but it's mine. And anyway, I don't know why I got on that tangent, but
I know.
for a real crime profile, you're the only civilian on the show. In other words, Jim and Laura are both these trained law enforcement people, and they have this extensive background as profilers. But sometimes they get really into some crazy level detail, and you are the civilian, like I said, the stand-in for us, because otherwise I'm afraid the two of them would go off on some, it might be fascinating, but it might be so confusing, tangent. Whereas you're actually saying, whoa, hold on here. I don't understand, or put that in English, or help us out here. Help us to understand why a perpetrator might behave in this fashion, or why when you're discussing a television show or what have you, you get into the level of detail that can be too much, and you're steering it back to the more human side of the thing, which is how a lot of us got interested in true crime.
We want a balance. There are definitely listeners out there who want that nitty gritty, they want as much technical behavioral analysis as they can get. And I completely love that and honor that. But I do always want to provide a balance that if we're getting very in a deep dive, let's pull it back and let's say it in a different way. Or sometimes I lob them softballs that I know they're going to hit out of the park. And then sometimes I redirect or I go back, we forgot this, and sometimes I have challenged them, as you may have heard, and sometimes, and it's not about disrespecting their experience. It's just, but what about this? And isn't this a contradiction? It's just about trying to understand and have continuity. We're not trying to have a gotcha conversation, and nobody's trying to be better than the other. And what you mentioned, Bill, is when we covered television shows and we covered something like Mindhunter on Netflix, or we covered Escape at Dannemora, which was on Showtime, which we were blessed to get that sponsorship. They can comment from the real world side of things, and I can comment from the production side of things. And I really loved doing that. I loved breaking apart. The study of acting is the study of human behavior. It is studying what it means to be human. That's what an actor does. That's what a writer does. That's what a director does, is holding that back up to an audience. And so in some ways, it is parallel to behavioral analysis. I study how an actor speaks, what they emphasize, how they move, what their gesture is, what they wear. Tells me a lot about their character, where they live, what their wallpaper is. These are all planned and chosen things from the designers that are holding up what it means to be human to the audience. And I loved breaking that down for Mindhunter and several other shows that we've covered.
Join us again next time as we continue our conversation with Lisa Zambetti of Real Crime Profile and Killer Casting. 2 podcasts worth your while. Thanks for listening to Mind Over Murder.
Mind Over Murder is a production of Absolute Zero and Another Dog Productions.
Our executive producers are Bill Thomas and Kristin Dilley.
Our logo art is by Pamela Arnois.
Our theme music is by Kevin MacLeod.
Mind Over Murder is distributed in partnership with Crawl Space Media.
You can follow us on Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram.
You can also follow our page on the Colonial Parkway Murders on Facebook.
And finally, you can follow Bill Thomas on Twitter at BillThomas56.
Thank you for listening to Mind Over Murder.